Okay, we are live. This is the Senate Education Committee on Wednesday, February 19th at 1:30. And today, the first thing we have is we have a guest, Sarah Tetzloff, who is the principal of the middle school in Vermont City. Is that correct?
Principal of Rutland Town School, which is a pre-K through 8th grade school.
Okay. And really the point here is we've had a couple of independent school people speak, and we had a visit to Montpelier High School. Half the committee was out yesterday, so we couldn't go. But we're trying to get just some testimony of sort of life on the ground. And we tend to hear from superintendents and people from the agency, and so I wanted to hear from a public school principal just about some of the challenges and opportunities and things that are going well, and some of the programmatic things that you're doing. That the committee might find interesting. All of this is a way of background for getting ready for the big bill that we'll be taking on soon. It's out. So we'll introduce ourselves, starting over here.
Hi,
Yes.
Senator Keisha Hinsdale from Chittenden Southeast.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Nara Hashim, Wyndham County.
Dave Weeks, Rutland County, you are, your family are my constituents. Yes.
Seth Bogarts from Bennington Senate District.
Terry Williams from Rutland.
Steve Heffernan from Madison County.
Thank you.
And you brought your family.
I did, yes. Do you want to introduce yourself, Mariam?
My name's Naria. I'm from Orwell.
Ethan, you want to say who you are?
My name is Ethan. I'm from Orwell.
Wow, I used to go with my mom to work everywhere.
So the floor is yours.
Yes. So thank you everybody so much for having me, and thank you for your public service. I know that you give endless hours, and really it comes to helping these little people behind me, so your work does not go unnoticed. Thank you. And you have quite the challenge ahead of you. So I was excited and honored just to be able to speak a little bit about what my day-to-day is at Rutland Town. So I've been there for 12 years. I'm now going into my 13th year. We have 350 students, approximately preschool through 8th grade. And Rutland Town's demographic is interesting in that there's a lot of affluent community families, but there's also a lot of a homeless population that we have. That's drastically changed what the school has looked like, I would say, in the past decade or so. So I started out as an assistant principal. I then, when I was pregnant with Ethan, was co-principal, and I'm in my 4th year of being principal. And one of the challenges is finding an assistant principal in leadership. So my last 2 principals have lasted 2 years, both of them, the assistants, and have just said, like, I don't want to work this hard. And that's pretty telling. It is, you name it, I do it. So from helping to transport kids in a van, our custodial staff that, we struggle, substitute teaching, being in the kitchen, like you name it, I'll jump in and do it. And it's grueling. And I think with one of the big changes that I've seen is with the voucher program, with our families.
You mean motel vouchers?
Motel vouchers, I apologize, yeah. Yes. That has been very challenging on the systems within school, draining on resources. And what's also challenging within that is that a lot of my families that are in these homeless hotels are addicts, and some of them are recovering addicts. And by putting these families in these situations, all of them have relapsed. And almost all but one have stayed within those homeless voucher programs. So there's not really an out for them. We're blessed that, local churches deliver food, schools do a ton. I mean, I myself have clothed lots of kids. There's no playground or area for these children also. So really school is the best place for these kids because they are fed, they're clothed, they're taken care of. But that's been one of the biggest challenges. A lot of these kids that come to us have significant needs all around, socially, emotionally, academically. Most of them require special education services. A lot of them require aids. They require a lot of support. So as we all know, finding people is difficult. So when you have paraeducators, which are often the least experienced, least qualified, they're working with some of our neediest kids, and finding them is really difficult. So I am very blessed that our teachers, we just do it. We do what's best. We cover for kids. We help support each other. But finding the resources is draining. And the mental health resources, the number of kids that I have that have been on wait list for over a year for counselors and other supports is endless. There's just not those counselors around. And what our kids are exposed to in these homeless hotels is pretty scary. So again, I've transported kids to and from some of these hotels. I had to attend with two of my staff members to look at a mugshot because there were some registered sex offenders doing some really inappropriate things as we're dropping children off in this location. So it is rough. And again, it's just not the best place for these kids to be, and there's no out. So most of the families aren't working. And again, they're just really struggling with substance abuse. And the kids will tell you, I know when our governor went to visit, the Cortina in particular, one of my students said, Ms. Tetzlaff, can you change my bus stop? Because we all have to go move to the Hampton Inn next week or this week because the governor is coming to visit. I was like, sure, we can change your bus stop, no problem. We'll pick you guys up. So I think that's just really draining, and that takes an emotional toll on my staff. Because we have made our DCF phone calls, our referrals to the Department of Children and Family Services has just increased year after year and increased. And we often just feel like nothing's being done to help these kids. So that's one big thing that every day, my day is different depending on who walks through the door. Because as you know, if they're homeless, as soon as they show up, you have to enroll them right away. You don't wait for paperwork. You don't wait for records from the other school. We get them into school. So.
Question on how many are from out of state? Is it mostly all interstate and they're just moving around, or?
Quite a few have been from New York. I don't have numbers, but quite a few are from neighboring towns. Some are from Vermont, but I would say the next would be from New York.
What do you think the number is?
Oh, hard telling right now. Some of them have also, I've had a few out of state that have moved to Vermont. They'll say like for the benefits for the education. So that's hard for me to put a number on it. And some of them are so transient too. But as I'm sure you know, the McKenna-Venti Act, the homeless law. So when a student the Cortina is now shut down for a period of time. That's where a lot of our students were that were homeless. They are able to attend our school until they find permanent housing. So that again just puts a strain on trying to find transportation, trying to make sure the kids can get to and from school safely. So even if they're living in Rutland City or in Bennington, if they choose to continue attending Rutland Town, we're responsible for providing that transportation.
Why is that? Because in our law, we provide the education, not the transportation.
Yeah, we have to provide transportation to and from, and oftentimes these families don't have transportation.
Where is that written in law that you have to do that?
I'm not sure. It's a good question. Yeah.
Probably a good question for legal counsel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that it isn't important, don't get me wrong, it's
Right.
just that
And
a lot
that
of
is-
resources
yes.
are being spent.
Our business manager will look and say, Sarah, you've got to be kidding me. Like, this is how much you're paying to transport one family. And I said, yep. We've even had to contract with like limousine services in the past because we can't find drivers.
So talk to us about, I mean, we're sort of mostly focusing on the kids here, and the kids that you have come from the homeless situation. Just talk about some of the things that, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you do for those children. You already have some.
Yeah.
And how much of it is programmatic and how much of it is ad hoc that you just do because you're good human beings and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think some of it is, we as teachers, we just do what's best for kids. So we're gonna find clothes for them. We're gonna get snacks for them. Head lice is a big thing. It'll make you start to itch. We were nervous about bed bugs at one point, but the chronic head lice, when kids are coming in, they're going right back to an environment with that. So that impacts, we have a full-time school nurse we have diabetic kids with multiple, medical needs, and that again is draining resources on the nurse or even myself. I've had to go to the pharmacy to get more treatments for kids with head lice. And if you're not, you have to create a comfortable learning environment first. Kids that have come in without undergarments, without socks, snow clothes, we leave those things at school. So some of these things we just do as teachers, but the increase that this has had and the draining of these resources, and my team just shows up. They're incredible. I would not have continued in my position if it wasn't for the incredible teachers and staff that I work with. I mean, from custodians, bus drivers, you name it. We all do what we do because we believe that we're gonna raise polite, kind, respectful, hardworking kids. I'm gonna do it, and I'm doing it. But sometimes I've had a few that have had to tag out, mainly because of that emotional drain.
Do you have a full-time nurse?
We do have a full-time nurse. She is retiring. I have 2 applicants right now. So that also has been a big shift in education. In 10 years, I was just telling my superintendent, 10 years ago, I hired a PE health teacher. I had over 70 licensed applicants. So if I saw a spelling error, grammatical error, didn't address it to me on a cover letter, that would go. Right now is, can they work in the United States? Do they have a license? Can they pass a background check? So I have 2 that have applied, and 1 is a licensed nurse, but not licensed within education, so that can take some time. The other strain of that is that nurses will make oftentimes 4 times what they will make in a school.
So, Senator.
Thank you. Regarding staff, I'm curious if you could speak generally or specifically about things that we could do regarding student burdens. I've heard often that actually teaching almost becomes a side project because there's so much paperwork and bureaucracy that public school teachers and staff have to go through, and principals. And I think it would be great if we could find a way to reduce that burden in such a way that teachers and other staff can do the thing that they signed up to do in the schools. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Can you restate your question originally?
Sure, it was kind of long-winded. Are there things that we can do to reduce the administrative and bureaucratic burdens on teachers and staff in schools?
Whew, that is $1 million question right there. Because I feel that that's a large part of my job too, right? I tell teachers that I need to create a comfortable and safe learning environment for you. And after COVID, there was a lot of schools that did a lot of social emotional learning and all this. And I was like, we are back to the books. We got to get back in the routine. And that's kind of been our MO. And I think the proof is in the pudding. Our school has done really well because we need to focus on, and we can incorporate those social emotional skills within our lessons, math, science, you name it. But I really got back to that. I would be really interested to hear what my teachers have to say about that. I think some of it is just time. Like they would love teacher time to work together. We have incredibly talented staff at my building, and they will often say, Sarah, can I please just have like 2 hours to work with the grade level up and below and share what I'm doing and what's working? That's what I hear a lot of.
And why can't
Yeah.
that? And that doesn't, and it's hard to make that happen because
we work in a supervisory union and we've merged districts too. So that has been a challenge in that oftentimes we have to wait until somebody above us says, yes, you can use your time to do this. Yes, you can use your time to do that. And one of the things that I pride in myself in is that when I've seen a need, so literacy, I was speaking about that when we had spoken earlier this week. About 10 years ago, with my teachers, we had realized that we weren't making the gains in our readers as much as we should. Fast forward, we got into the science of reading way before it was this hashtag after COVID. So we looked and was like, what is a research-based, brain-based way to teach kids to read and to write? So we went ahead as our own school and did that. Now that we're more part of the supervisory union, everybody has to kind of be on that same page before you move forward. So I think that's hard. Sometimes when we see something that's going to work, we can't just act on it because everybody has to be in the same position. And what may work well for my school, there may be another school within our district, those teachers aren't ready. It may not fit. But I'm a pretty, we're 18, average class size are 18 kids. And again, we have the full gamut of backgrounds of students. So what I hear mainly is, can we just do what's best for our school? And can we have some of that time to collaborate with one another?
Thank you.
Yes.
So Senator Williams was next.
So, and you're not the exception either. I mean, you're the one that's coming and telling us about this. There are other schools I'm sure have the same problems. I remember when the 3 senators from Vermont County sat through the school board meetings when you guys were talking about cutting a school bus or cutting a resource officer. We ended up saying, no, we got a good product here. We're not going to cut anything. You just need to get people out to vote. And you did that, but that doesn't solve your problems that you're in right now. So
Yeah.
So my hat's off to you for what you do.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
I just wanted to look up someone I haven't talked to in a long time, but have respected and thought about from time to time. Craig Huttvader, the principal at Mount Holly. So I just remember going to visit him, and he had made statewide news for asking for a shelter and laundry service to be co-located with his school. And this was 2016. So he was well before, what we consider the latest wave of the housing crisis. He was saying, I have a lot of homeless families and, I'm trying to figure out how to take care of them on site, frankly. And I bring that up because it sounds like you end up doing a lot of the social service coordination and work, that it has to be done. What does your capacity look like there? How many, social workers or resource officers do you have per student? What is your level of need to take that, to allow you to focus on the bigger picture and their learning?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. One of the things with the homeless vouchers is that all the ones I know of, they don't have laundry service. So I have a parent that's been homeless for 3 years in my building, and we have a relationship where she felt comfortable enough to say, Ms. Tetzlaff, my kids can't come to school today. We have no clean clothes. And I was like, get them in here. We will do some laundry within here. But again, that's us doing some of this. And I would not be here if it was not for my incredible team, my behavior specialist, my family school coordinator, social worker, some of my special educators. We laugh. I'm like, I don't think your son has any clothes left in his bedroom. I was just telling her yesterday, because we'll just grab what these kids need. So I have one family school coordinator, a social worker. She works around the clock. Again, a gem. Not a lot of schools have that. My behavior specialist, a couple of other people, guidance counselor, they take a lot of those things, but above and beyond, which is not, when I talk to other schools, you got to balance a little work-life balance. And we just, our hearts in it. So if there were other outside agencies doing that, I think another change within school is that there's a lot of initiatives, and it's put on schools. So it's like after school program. I am so blessed to have the Boys and Girls Club. Right? So I just wonder too about rec centers. Could they take some athletics? Probably upset a lot of people with that idea. Could they take some cost for summer school, for during breaks, so it's not always the school? Having to figure out transportation and how to get these kids to and from these programs.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you do for the kids in your community.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks to my team for sure.
Can I ask one more question? It sounds to me like consolidation hasn't helped you be more nimble necessarily.
Right.
And that is a big question for us, is how there, something that might look like a solution isn't necessarily a solution unless it actually does what we hope it will do. So we're aiming to try and give schools more flexibility and freedom to move and to act. And,
Yeah.
But do you feel like that's something you were promised with this consolidation, or where was there a point where you wish you could have said, like, hey, give us our autonomy?
I just think anytime you merge philosophy, beliefs, programs, whatever, is going to be messy. And I think we're kind of known for if it's research-based, if this is what's best for kids, we do it. Yes, maybe my hand has been slapped a few times. But when you have those teachers that are eager and ready for that, we've been able to do that. And I think some outliers of the smaller schools have come with a little more resistance. And I've also, my kids grew up, we live in Orwell, so I am from, we live in a very rural area, so I've experienced as a mom, wonderful elementary school, but that magic number 10, I started our middle school at Rutland Town probably 8 years ago, Terra Institute, research, all, definitely grassroots. We started our middle school in 5th grade, so we departmentalized in 5th grade, so there was a teacher for ELA and social studies and math and science, the same thing for 6th and 7th and 8th grade, there's 4 content teachers. And that little bit of movement just in between classes has really helped decrease behaviors. I was always like, 5th grade recess is the worst. But you're getting growing pains. Yeah. So my own daughter, she had 14 kids since preschool in a class. And when you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere and you have only 2 other girls in your class, her last year, I would say, was probably the roughest because those social needs. So I really think looking at and asking kids, what is it that you need? What do you wish could be different? Wonderful school, but I really worry about these rural, really tiny schools and the lack of exposure. I had some kids that registered from the Philippines in my school. That's another struggle, ELL. It's like, Google Translate doesn't have Tagalog. Yeah. What am I gonna do? Where do I find an ELL person? I worked in Burlington. I know the importance. I'm like, good thing, we're just gonna, language immersion, here we go. But those are resources. Like, can we contract out some of those things, those services? When I talk to some of my friends in Massachusetts and other areas, they contract out, like, yes, we'd love to have human people, but what can we do to fill a need? That there are other people that may be cheaper too. So
I've got more questions, but go.
Yeah.
If you want to, things you want to.
A couple of other things to mention is the free and reduced lunch forms. I know you and I were talking about that earlier. I'm very grateful that the state has now put those forms online. People need internet. People need to be able to read and follow directions to fill out those forms. And it's been a struggle. So at my school, we were about 33% free and reduced lunch 2 years ago. I think we were last year at 6 or 7%. So as many times as I can say, please fill this out, please fill this out, please fill this out, they're like, breakfast and lunch is free. I'm not filling it out. Like, what's the point? I already get this. And then when we try to, and then that impacts title funds, that impacts funding for your school. So I'm like, we have such a higher need due to the homeless population in my building, but I'm under 10% free and reduced lunch. Like, this is not fair. So we had a board member that had suggested setting up some Chromebooks at parent-teacher conferences. So we had done that. Unfortunately, the website was down that evening that we started doing it. And again, unfortunately, oftentimes parents, not all parents that receive free and reduced lunch attend parent conferences. So as much as we try to reach for that, for a variety of reasons, they're just not filling out those forms. So that's been a struggle.
No, she answered the question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. One other thing that's just been, as we all know, the day that, we live in a scary time now, and so we have to take all threats seriously, but the threat assessments, just due to the mental health crisis, I would say, with everybody, but especially our youngest learners, that's been a huge strain. We are very fortunate. We just hired a school resource officer, so not a lot of schools have their own school resource officer. So we are very fortunate. So he just started in January, and that sucks up a lot of resources. So I, had a threat, and that took like all of Friday for me and another staff member to go through that process, and then inform families and staff and discuss next steps. So I think that's a large part of my day. And then students that really struggle emotionally and socially, that can act out and sometimes hurt other staff member, that is very draining, because again, I have some staff that have been kicked and spit and hit at day to day, and when you can make more at Hannaford's than you can, as a paraeducator. That's a tough. You really have to have a heart, and you have to be a special someone to show up every day to support some of these kids, and we just don't have the mental health facilities or the alternative schools. I've said some of these small rural schools, I'm like, build an alternative school. If you build it, they will come.
Senator Williams had a question first, I think.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, for the last 2 years, actually, I'm involved in, the homeless prevention center and going to different meetings. And one of the people that were at those meetings were great. A lot of them volunteered their time. And the question they always had is, why do they all keep coming here? They keep coming there because they're taken care of, which is the way it should be too. And I remember you can't pass your school budget. You can't provide the things that you provide for them. So I'm just giving you a compliment that you're obviously taking care of those people. And that's why they come there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you believe that is there a set of protocols that students have to follow when they come in at all? Like you were just saying, if they spit or if they kick or if they swear, is there protocols and is it pretty standard throughout, or is every school different?
Every school's different, but you have school rules that you need to follow, and there's consequences if you don't. But oftentimes these kids, they come from such a rough background for a variety of reasons. It's our responsibility to educate them, and so it is our responsibility. And sometimes my public school may not be the best fit for them, and that's a tough. I pride myself in kids. I've had kids from alternative schools, and I've been their parent. I've worked with my behavior specialists, and I'll slowly bring them into the classroom and say, these are the rules of Rutland Town. This is how we respect and speak to one another. And that works probably 98% of the time. But then sometimes there are kids with just such significant needs that they need a therapeutic environment, because they're impacting the learning of everybody. And that just is a long process, an expensive process, and we just don't have those facilities in Vermont. We don't. And there's a waiting list too.
And if you have one child acting out in a class, what happens? Really acting out, like being a disruption to the class, what happens in the class?
Then either that student is removed, or sometimes the whole class is removed. Yeah. So I am trained in crisis prevention intervention, and I'm one of the trainers for my school district, along with my behavior specialist and another behavior specialist. So we teach others on how to de-escalate, and hands-on as last resort.
So, what do you talk about your after-school programs?
Sure. Yeah. So
who would they target? Who utilizes them?
Yeah, I was very fortunate that one of our school board members had a contact because we had an after-school program within our district that was wonderful, but they couldn't staff it. So it went like 8 months we didn't have staff, we didn't have anything. And I had so many parents that were like, Sarah, I have to work. Like, I can't find anybody. There were kids, I'm sure, that were left home alone that should not be left home alone. So a board member had dropped a name for the Boys and Girls Club of Rutland County. We reached out to them, and that's that. They have been phenomenal.
They come to the school? They
come right to my school, yep. And so kids are served a snack and dinner. They also have dinner. And then they will run our summer school program as well. So that's kindergarten through 6th grade. So then they do age out.
Okay.
But that, I remember when we weren't able to staff with Tapestry anymore, I told my superintendent, I said, I cannot run an after-school program. That is a full-time job. So like, I will have to walk if that's asked of me, because I think that's a big thing, is so many things are put on schools about, you know, laundry service, mental health service, nursing, and it was after school, before school.
So you've talked a lot about, because we asked you to, the challenges. So talk about some of the things you're doing programmatically that you think are interesting, that we might find interesting.
Yeah.
For your general school population. I did see parents, we'll get to you.
So, like I said, years ago, we started, all of our teachers were trained in the Orton-Gillingham approach to reading, which is the science of reading. So all of them have had at least like one class of that, and then just continue their professional development. And I'm very fortunate, and I'm not like many schools in that my teachers are hungry to learn, and they'll do it not always on contracted time, which is great. You know, they'll take a summer class, and they'll do stuff on the weekends because they know it's what's best for kids. So our teachers are trained in Orton-Gillingham. I'm also fortunate that we've had interventionists, both reading and math for middle and elementary. So we have a ton of safety nets academically. So if our students are not making the progress that we want, and teachers are working with them, there's a whole multi-tier system of support process that we follow. They can then receive services from an interventionist or a special educator that are just extremely well trained. So when I look at other schools, they may have somebody right out of school, or they're on an emergency license and they're teaching some of those neediest kids. I don't do that. Our best teachers are teaching those neediest kids. So those are some good things. Then we started noticing our reading's really solid right now, our phonics skills. And this is the first year that we have started with Keys to Literacy. Again, research-based writing. We just want to make sure these kids are not on a screen all the time. They got to be able to read and write. We still teach cursive in 3rd grade. So again, it's really back to the books with some of that. So we've started at a school board meeting, one of my reading teachers who's just incredible, she shared about our professional development around writing, and we came up with our writing beliefs and how do we incorporate writing across different subject areas. So that's one thing that we're doing. We have a really strong math curriculum that we've had for years, Bridges, and we're continuing that. We're trying to focus more on science as well, but just having that baseline kind of before COVID was priceless.
And you did what you've just been describing on your own at the school?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Senator Williams, shoot your hand up. Okay.
If you feel comfortable sharing your professional development goals, and someone like you's given a lot of your talent and treasure and time to Vermont, do you want to be a superintendent in Vermont eventually?
Oh.
What if a district in Boston wanted you? What you clearly have a passion for this, and we should make sure that you feel like you have a future.
Oh, thank you. I was thinking, what classes am I going to take next? That's where I was going. I was like, let me see, what did I sign up for? I love what I do right now, but I am always hungry for a challenge, for sure. So I'm excited to see what the state is going to do with, there's definitely a need for an alternative school. I do not want to be a superintendent at all. No, thank you. I want to be with kids every day. So I'm able to be with kids and with students, kids and teachers. And that's what lights my fire, is seeing those kids. And those really tough kids typically are my favorite. The really, really tough ones. Mm-hmm.
Senator Williams, now you have a question.
So after school programs.
Yes.
I remember last year that we found out that there was like $4.4 million available from the marijuana tax, but it couldn't go to the LEAs. It had to go to a nonprofit. Have you got anybody in town that would consider doing a Rutland Town recreation, and it's not just after school, it goes through the summer too, that money's available. And there are a list of, I think the Deputy Secretary of Labor contacted me and wanted to know any schools in Rutland County that were looking for the money.
Yeah.
So
The Boys and Girls Club, are they not?
they're on the list.
They're on the list,
They are?
yeah. Yeah, that's who we use, and they've expanded to the other schools within my school district too.
How do the kids get home after school?
We do not provide busing. Yeah, we don't provide busing in the summer or in the after-school program, so it's up to parents to pick their kids up.
Is that a hindrance for kids being able to?
Yes,
Yeah.
for some.
I had one principal this summer said to me, maybe we should switch, and rather than have the buses run at 3, have them run at 5. And if parents want to pick the kids up early, they can, but otherwise, most kids have the after-school programs. Then the buses run.
Yeah.
So she's the only person who said that to me, but I heard it once. So, yes,
I'm not sure how much more time we have.
we have time.
Okay. So Sarah, you're kind of in a unique position as the principal between you and the Secretary of Education. There's lots of prospective potential changes that are going to be happening over the next couple of years. Just wondering if you have any kind of feedback from your perspective on that layer again between you and the Agency of Education.
Yeah, I think Rutland Town School is a little different because I don't foresee a lot of change within my school building just because I have almost 20 kids in a class. I think I would like to see, I'm selfish in that we've created a middle school starting at 5th grade. And I just think there's a lot that goes on with the adolescent brain when they turn 10. So I know there's some conversations like K to 6, but I almost wonder if some other things could be looked at, some other schools that do like a 5th and 6th. What does that look like? Yeah, that's a really tough question.
Well, how about, let me make it a little bit more specific.
Okay.
So your interaction with the SU, how do you envision that would change if the SU becomes roughly 10,000 students?
To me, I think that's a good thing. I think it's just more level of expertise, more ability to collaborate with other teachers and share resources. So, there's a number of superintendents in a very small area where I work. And so ELL is a prime example. I'm like, can we just ask I'm not gonna say their name, but can we just ask them for some help, please? Because I know that there's an ELL teacher, and what can we share? Can I barter something with you? I have an unfit need. So to me, I think that could be an exciting opportunity.
We'll send it a week's finish.
Okay, so a quick
Yeah.
follow-on. Thanks, guys. Your interaction with your school board, that may change in this new construct. I'm just wondering if you had any reactions to that notion.
Yeah, and I served on the school board in Orwell for 10 years. And I remember one meeting that was highly attended was just the discussion about the front sign outside. We're gonna change it. And oh my goodness, the number of people that showed up to talk about changing of the front sign and what's gonna happen there. I can't even imagine what's gonna happen because it has always been this local control. And I've been on the other side of that table as a school board member. Get the popcorn ready. It will be interesting. Yeah, we'll see what happens, and I think it's a little scary for principals and teachers thinking, who is our boss going to be? Who's going to tell us what to do? And if this has been working for so long, do we have to change something just because another school is doing this? And what if they don't have any homeless kids there? Like, we need money to do this. That's scary.
Okay, thank you.
So, I've lost track of whose hands were first. Let's just go 1, 2, 3.
Sounds good.
Just a quick follow-up to something Senator Weeks brought up and something you brought up as well, regarding getting access to other services that might be in another district, and districts were to be expanded, how it would become become easier to gain access to that. So under the current system, if there's somebody who provides a service just over in another district, and they're 10 or 15 minutes away, but there just happens to be that boundary, there's nothing that you can do to get that service in your school. Just wanted to make sure because that's, because I'm mulling over the district sizes that we've been talking about, and I can definitely see why it would be more beneficial and easier to get access to a certain service that might be nearby, but just happens to be over this invisible boundary that's drawn on the map. So just wanted to follow up on that. Thank you.
So that's supposed to be the BOCES act that we passed last year. That's supposed to, but the school supervisory union has to get involved in that. And that's to share services, and can't even remember what it stands for, but it's for special education, for ELL, EEL. They're supposed to share assets if they have it. And I don't know what the implementation date was on that. I think it was effective.
I think they need to opt into it. They need to organize it.
Yeah, and that's something that.
Still not everybody in this.
So kind of lever's been pulled back a little bit.
So you said you merged at some point. Who'd you merge with, and what were your class sizes before, and does it work better now?
Our enrollment's been steady, really hasn't changed, maybe 10 to 15, give or take. So that hasn't changed. We merged with Rutland Southwest, so Wells, Poultney, Middletown Springs. They merged with Rutland Central Supervisory Union, so West Rutland, Rutland Town, Proctor Elementary and High School. So we merged together. I would say not a lot has changed for our school in particular, given that we have steady enrollment. That really hasn't changed at all. And with that merger, we do things together.
So when you merged, it didn't change you having more kids come to you from someplace else?
No.
Okay. Did it happen elsewhere? Did they close any schools when they did that? When they merged? No. Oh, okay.
Not for these two school districts.
Right.
You were talking about the SU.
Correct, the SU, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. No, everybody had stayed the same. And we provide school choice for our high school students. So our kids can go to public, private, in-state, out-of-state. If it's out-of-state, there's an average in-state tuition that follows that student, which I think is an attraction for Rutland Town.
What is that? Do you know that average? What they pay if you wanted to go out of state?
It's the average high school tuition so that's announced every year. So it's a statewide average, and that's, so if you go to private school in Pennsylvania, for example, they would pay that, not more than that, because oftentimes it's a lot more expensive.
What size classes are you? What's your average class size? 17
to 18.
Okay. And one of the things that this committee is thinking about as we think about this big thing we're dealing with here, we're talking about everything from district size to school, or what's the best school size for different ages, and then what's the best class size.
Yeah.
So what would your advice be to us for your
Excuse me.
territory?
Sometimes it's also your cohort of students. So you can have, I would guess that if you look at third grade reading scores across the country, you're gonna see the neediest readers in that cohort, because they came to kindergarten and in masks. So all those phonics skills, again, I have no data to back this up, I'm just saying from my experience, they struggled learning those phonics skills because they couldn't see their teacher speaking. So I'm just saying my third grade cohort, and I've talked to other friends that are working in other states, they're like, last year, they're like, yes, it's second grade. Why is yours second grade? And I said, well, this is what I think. They learned, came to kindergarten and everybody was in masks. So that's like a needy cohort. So I have 2 sections of every grade except kindergarten. I have 44 kids in kindergarten. Some of them come in knowing how to read. Some of them come in that are not potty trained. So there's a huge discrepancy from that. So I have 3 sections of kindergarten, because I challenge any one of you to get 22 of them ready for recess.
Yeah.
Pardon me. So that's a good question. Sometimes I've had teachers that have said, they like higher numbers, 18 is a magic number, to somewhere 15. So I would say anywhere in that range, because if you have some really explosive behaviors and you can have one of those kids in your room, that changes the whole need of that classroom. So it can really depend on the cohort. But I would not like to see, for me as a parent, under 15.
A parent and a teacher?
Me personally, as a parent and teacher, 15. Yeah, it just gets tough. You want to, have other kids collaborate, and there's only so many groups you can make. So when you get smaller than that, it's hard.
So your school, you said, is how many? 350?
Around 350, give or take.
And K through 8.
Preschool through 8th grade.
Preschool,
Yep.
okay.
So we have two full day preschool programs in our school. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I just never do want to miss an opportunity to ask our customers their thoughts. So I don't know if you feel comfortable if we ask your kids,
Oh, yeah.
what worked for them, or what didn't work.
What worked for me was like when a teacher would sit up on the board and give me like direct information. Like my math teacher, I would say in like 5th grade, Miss Holden was like my favorite math teacher of all. She could give me a problem and she'd just lay it on paper. She'd go with it through me until I got it. And I was like, I got it, I can do it. Give me a different problem. And it was like the favorite time of year where I could just like, she'd sit down with me, she'd give me a problem, and she'd just be like, now times 2 times 2 or 4 times 4, and then you'll get your problem. It just was direct information, like it was face to face. It wasn't just someone who was on a board teaching a whole group of kids, which I mean, like now that I'm in middle school, that's what all my teachers are gonna do, because they only have like 45 minutes with me a day. But it was when a kid was able to just go face to face with my teacher, that was like the best for me.
Mm-hmm. Is math a subject you like now?
Yeah, I love it.
I wish I had that in 5th grade.
What do you think about your class size?
Well, this
How many
year
kids are in
is
your class? Like, what works for you?
98. Or like out of my whole 7th grade.
Well, just what do you think about your class size?
How many in your class?
Classroom.
Classroom size.
Like 20.
Do you like that
Yeah.
better,
It's
or
not bad, but I like my ELA class. There's like 12.
compared to elementary school?
Oh, I like middle school. I don't understand the question.
So you like a class where you have 12 kids? Is that like a homeroom?
No, it's my ELA class. It's like a whole. It's kind of small though.
Is that English? I don't
Yeah.
even know what ELA is. Okay.
It's English. Yeah.
Anything else from anybody? It's been really helpful. So you said at one point that you were talking about trying to find your teachers wanting the 2 hours. to get
Yeah.
at the beginning. Do you actually have to get permission to do that with them?
Relatively speaking, I mean, I can find pockets of time to give them, but typically, yeah, you need to have an agenda and.
So, okay, so you need to go above in order to get the ability to.
I think our teachers are always asking for, and I said 2 hours just to say,
Yeah.
but they're always just saying, is there more time for us to collaborate within the building?
Yeah.
And it's just, there's a lot of work to be done. So like we updated our math program this year. So it's like, well, that in-service time is, we're talking about Bridges 3 or our writing professional development that we're doing. So it's just that gift of time. I have a retired teacher that's running for the school board in Rutland Town this year, and she has said, Sarah, what can I give to teachers? Like, you asked for volunteers. I said, the best thing you could give them, go cover a lunch duty or a recess duty. So I do that during the holidays, December, for every one of my staff members. I'll say, surprise, today's your day. And they're like, yes, I have 45 minutes of uninterrupted, unexpected planning time. And so she comes in, and that they talk about that all the time. They can't wait for her to come in, and it's just that time you don't always get.
Do you ask parents to come in and watch? I know they'd have to have a background.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Do they advertise quite often saying, hey,
We're always
parents or grandparents saying, give our teachers a break, come and watch the kids eat or play?
Yes, and there has not been a long line of people
Yeah.
willing to do that. I think especially after COVID, I asked for that, and they're like, no. And finding substitutes, that's a whole nother struggle too.
Talk to us a little bit more. You talked about, I think you said early in this presentation that you've developed a lot of your own curriculum.
Yeah, not me personally.
Well, the school.
Yeah.
Teachers within your
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
Okay, and how do you go to look at, as you're doing that, do you look at model curriculum and then make it conform to what works for you, or do you sometimes have teachers just get together and come up with something pretty original to your school?
So with the merger too, we now have a process. So if we want to look at any curriculum, anything, we need to have it vetted higher ups. But prior to the merger, when we started our math program Bridges, which is what I would do if we were to do this again, is that there was this is when the Common Core came out, so I'm dating myself, but there was math programs and there was a team of teachers across the district that literally unpacked the box and made sure it was, yes, is this Common Core? Okay. And then they piloted that within a classroom. So they maybe picked 2 or 3. And then based upon that, they were like, this is what's best for kids. So it was more grassroots. But I think for the reading and literacy, that was really just, we saw a need, we saw that it could fit and help kids, and we just went ahead and did it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that was really, really insightful and helpful for us.
Okay.
So.
And I welcome you to come visit anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
not a question, thank you. But just a comment perhaps for the committee. I think your testimony was super helpful. I do think it would be great to hear even more from principals and teachers, especially about the district sizes and the access to different services, and for different schools being able to reach up the road to maybe get a tutor for a student, or whatever they might need, instead of confining schools to these boundaries in which they can't access different services. So it was very helpful, and I think some more of that would be good.
Which raises the question, why can't we cross district? Like, you look across the road and say, they got a person that we could use.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you call over there and say, district, whatever, why can't we use that? What's the voodoo that we can't do this?
Because we don't pay for them.
But they're gonna get paid anyway.
Right, and pardon me, hazing, harassment, and bullying, that's another time-consuming process. There may be a district that has somebody that just does that, but that falls on principals, administrators, behavior specialists, etc. And I've even been like, can we have somebody like that for our district? But they work for somebody else.
And larger district would perhaps contain more
Yeah.
than be.
Yeah.
Which is what I think you said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you given I don't know if we asked this question, have you given a thought to how many districts we should have? We've heard 5. Have you given any thought to that?
No.
Okay.
I don't envy your jobs at all. And again, I thank you for your service, because I know it is a thankless job for sure. I wouldn't be the first person to ask that question to. No, I do not know.
Do you have a cell phone policy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're old school.
old school.
Yeah, we've had a cell phone policy since I started, and so it was funny when my superintendent's like, we were talking about cell phone policies. I'm like, cell phone policy? I had one since I started here.
And what is it?
They have to hand them in to their teacher advisory first thing in the morning. So we have like parking lots or like over the door shoe hangers. They plunk them in there. And I tell parents that are worried, there's a phone in every room. We all have walkie-talkies if we're outside. If there's ever an emergency, we can find your child. And they have Chromebooks. So at teacher discretion, they can, they can use their Chromebooks, but they don't need to have, if they have an Apple or some electronic watch, that has to go into. So that was added recently. Yeah.
And that's really helped you?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. And I think one thing too about Rutland Town is we've had some great field trips. We have a number of amazing things at our school, but our 7th graders always go to Camp Chinchacook in New York. And they used to spend a few nights. There'll be a few day trips moving forward. but there's no electronics there. And some of the feedback that I've gotten from kids years later is that, Ms. Tetzlaff, that was the best field trip ever. But the tears that come at the start of that trip is shocking because it's almost a withdrawal. Like they are going through a withdrawal from their electronic device. So yes, we've had a policy, we've had it for a while.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for, allowing me to come here. Yeah, it was great to meet you all. Take care.
Thanks for bringing your kids.
Thank you. Hopefully they were okay.
Wow, your daughter is very well spoken. What grade are you in?
We can go off, and we'll be back on at 2:45 live. It's the Senate Education Committee on February 19th. We're back after a short break. It's about 2:45, and we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon learning about sort of like an introduction to CTEs, how they work, what you do, who you serve. You know what to say. So you weren't here when we did introductions the last time, an hour or so ago. Okay, so we'll do introductions.
Okay, I'm
Sorry,
Scott.
well, I'm sorry. No, actually.
Oh, you will do it.
We'll start.
I didn't know the finger was coming.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I lost track of where we were. Keisha Hinsdale, Chittenden Southeast.
Nader Hashim, Wyndham County.
Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
South Boulevard, Superintendent in South District.
Terry Williams, also Rutland.
Steve Heffernan, Edison County District.
And now, you three, in whichever order, introduce yourselves.
Melissa, we're looking at you.
All right. Melissa Connor, Director of Stafford Technical Center in Rutland.
Okay.
Jody Emerson, Superintendent Director of Central Vermont Career Center.
Scott Farr, Superintendent Director, River Valley Technical Center School District in Springfield, Vermont.
You're in Springfield, Worship. You're in
Barry.
Barry. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to give a much more of an introduction than that. So you were recommended to us as the three people who have done this before and helped educate committees in the past. So
We've spent some time with this committee in the past,
you're ready to go.
or at least half of you were here.
Yes, partially, there's actually a lot of new people in the committee, so we're just getting the introduction. So however you want to do it, just go ahead and start talking to us.
So all of the directors in Vermont are part of the Vermont Association of CTE Directors. And so you should have or will be getting our latest version of our letter in response to the APA study. I included that in my testimony so that you could see that. That APA study of 2023, we have had numerous iterations of our response to that and where we stand. And prior to that, there's tons of history that Scott has been able to pull together around funding and governance for CTE. So we have those resources that we can share with you at any time. I think because there's some new folks here, it's really important to talk about career and technical education overall. And so in Vermont, career and technical education is a flexible pathway. It's an opt-in system where students apply for admission to go to career and tech ed programs and centers. And we have 3 different governance structures in the state. We have our model, which is independent. There are 4 of us that have independent CTE districts. The majority of CTEs are part of a host district. So Melissa is an example of that. She's at Stafford, which is part of the Rutland district. So 2 of you are very aware of that. And then we also have 2 centers that are in independent high schools and are called comprehensive high schools under the Vermont law term of comprehensive and definition, which may be different than what we hear about next week if we hear anything about comprehensive high school. And I say that because the Listen and Learn tour, the only CTE portion of that report, mentions comprehensive high schools in a very small section. So we don't know that that's the model that exists in Vermont currently or if that's a different version. And Pat and I were just upstairs in the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee talking with them about CTE as well. So there's a lot of information in their recording about the different models that we have of CTE in the state. We also not only have different governance models, but we have different ways that we serve students. And so some of our students come to half-day programs, which are 2-hour programs. And they might come to a morning session, which is maybe the second-year students, and they might go to an afternoon session if they're first-year students, but it's a 2-hour half-day model.
We also have 4-hour full-day models, which my center is, but we don't actually have the kids full day. We have them their 4 hours every morning, and then they go back to their sending schools. And then we have full day with academic models where students are at the center for the entire day and they receive their academic courses there, sometimes in a pull-out model where different groups of kids are going out of those programs at different times, and sometimes in like a different type of schedule. So there is no one way that students access CTE in our state. There are lots of different ways that students access it. And in your center, some students come in for smaller, like pre-technical type of courses, and then you have the two-hour programming.
Yes, we have a half-day model, and but we have, because our CTE is all in one like high school, of a high school of 925 students. There's more accessibility for sophomores to take pre-tech foundational courses, which are 1 hour.
We're actually,
exploratory.
just so we don't get too bugged, we're going to have you on next
Perfect.
actually, to talk
So that's
about
Pat.
the difference in, actually, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Pat Gookin. I'm the CTE director at St. Johnsbury Academy.
Okay.
Thank you for having me today.
And we'll have you come on afterwards to talk about the difference in the way that it's done in your school, but, yeah, so, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm curious, how do you want this information? And I always like to bring propaganda. CTEs get to market, and so I have my annual report, one for everybody, and I have my program of studies, one for everybody, just so you can take a look at some of the programming that's offered at the Central Vermont Career Center and some of our data as well. I think that helps maybe inform some questions that you might have. Statewide, we do have a proficiency list on the Agency of Education's website for each program. So there are skill-specific proficiencies across our programs that we use statewide. So we do have the same proficiencies as far as the CTE program skills that our students are working at, whether it's in that half-day model or full-day model. But what we deal with as far as proficiencies from our sending schools for our students to graduate is just as diverse as our group. So I have 6 sending schools at my center, and they all have different graduation requirements. So what students need to meet those graduation requirements differ across those pieces. The other piece that my center has that not all centers have is that the director before me was able to negotiate with each of those sending schools. So we have embedded credits. So when you get that program of studies, you can see there's a list of what are the embedded credits or proficiencies that students who attend CVCC get, and those are in there, and that was because all of our sending schools agreed to uphold that for every program that we have. That's not true at all of our CTEs across the state.
I'll go next since we're the same kind of governance model and clear the way for everybody else. I've been there 21 years at River Valley. We serve Springfield High School, Green Mountain, Bellows Falls Union, and New Hampshire School. We have a dozen programs. We have the full breadth of what is called pre-tech programs because our region feels it's important that 9th and 10th graders get an exposure. But travel time is a challenge, so we offer what's called pre-tech foundations, which is primarily for the students from our neighboring high school, Springfield High School. And they come over for an hour, and we offer, each program offers a pre-technical studies foundation so that kids can try it out. And over the course of their 9th and 10th grades, they can try out 4 different programs to see if that's what they want to do. Because transportation is a challenge, we offer what's called pre-tech exploratory, and they come for 2 hours, and they're from our sending schools, Green Mountain, Bellows Falls. Now, we don't get any from New Hampshire because New Hampshire doesn't allow that. But the idea is to offer 9th and 10th grade programming to anybody that wants it, because there are some kids that just want to have that hands-on experience and it's not offered in their program. And they're just waiting to get to the program. So our pre-tech programs are pretty well subscribed right now. My pre-tech exploratory is full, and we've only lost 1 student in a whole year, which means they're liking it. The other thing that we do that is to get kids fired up to come is we have a pretty extensive middle school outreach program. To act as a segue, we do 2 different kinds of tours on campus for 7th and 8th graders. We offer a summer tech camp. Also, we partner to offer more specific summer tech camps for middle school students. We do after-school CTE awareness and exploratory program called Tech Time. So it's meet for an hour and a half, and you're welding within 10 minutes of getting there just to get their attention. They're very safely welding, but yeah. And then who knew about this one is that we would offer that that after-school program, and we'd offer robotics. 2 years ago, we had 5 kids that would show up. Now we have over 35 kids showing up. They're on the ground doing robots, they're in the air doing robots, and it's a good way for them to learn programming, teamwork, and all of that. And I think they've been to 4 or 5 events here, and what has happened with that is the 8th graders who are in the robotics club have signed up for pre-tech engineering. They're getting a college credit, and then they're signed up for engineering next year, where they might have said, oh, engineering is too hard. Well, now they understand. So we were really surprised at how that is thriving. We use grant funds to do that, and we also, employers who have supported the engineering advanced manufacturing program have put their money where their mouth is and are making donations to further support the club, because robots cost money, travel costs money, T-shirts and all that goes into it. It costs $300 to feed the whole crew pizza when they come and compete. Your car will smell like Domino's for a week later. But it's all well worth it to have kids have real experiences in career and technical education. I have some more systemic points, but I'll wait.
I think the other piece that's important that's across all of our centers is because we get Perkins funding, that's how we're held accountable. It's federal funding. And all of our programs have to have industry recognized credentials or college credits. So they either have 6 college credits or more, or they have 3 credits and an industry recognized credential, or they have multiple industry recognized credentials. And so that's really important to think about, because a lot of people think about vocational, the old career and tech ed, as that just hands-on learning, but there is a lot more to it in today's CTE than there used to be 30, 40 years ago.
I'm going to do a little bit of a piece here. We testified almost a year ago. Melissa, Jody, and I, in this very room, Senator Campion was at that end, and our data, the Perkins data, was just hitting about when, and I've been on the road all day, so they were all talking about, well, our data came, did you see, blah, 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 blah. Senator Campion had got the data, and he was asking, what is your graduation rate? And the graduation rate around the state is 10 to 12% higher than the average for CTE students as opposed to regular education. Now, I didn't have the number because my data didn't drop at the time, so I felt a little bit out there. But about a year ago today, that's what he opened with.
I remember.
Yeah.
So let Melissa in quickly, just so you can.
Sure. So thank you for having me here today. Just to give you a little bit of background, this is year 30 for me in career and tech ed here in Vermont. I've served career and tech ed as both a business educator at Scott Center, actually. I also did a stint as assistant director there before I moved to Stafford, and this is year 10 for me at Stafford, back in my hometown, which is kind of nice. You know, I sent you the testimony, and I think we're all going a little off script here today. So I think, just to tell you a little bit about Stafford, Stafford is a full day center. We have a full boat of academic instructors on staff. So our students do the majority of their academics here. For some of the graduation requirements that are up to 11 high schools that we serve need. We do have a flexible pathways coordinator on our staff who arranges independent studies for them, which are not the best way to do things. And that's one of the things that I'm sure we'll get to is the varied graduation requirements. For centers that have a smaller number of partner high schools, negotiating what is embedded within a program and what's accepted is a lot easier than when you have 11 high schools. One of them that we partner with on some program is an international baccalaureate school, which adds another layer of complication when you're looking at things. I'm excited to talk about, the proposed models, and I'm not sure, Jody, how you want the format to go, if you want me to just jump in now and then I can be done, or if you want to kind of lead that. So I'll leave that up to you, Jody.
I'm not sure how much you want us to get into what we know about the potential proposal, because I don't believe you've seen it
We
yet.
want to talk about that, but we want to ask a few more questions first. So
I actually have a question about that. In 3 structured models, would you be better off with 1? If so,
Potentially.
which one would you like? I mean, this is the year of CTE, I think, personally.
I think there is a willingness overall from the majority of directors to I look at all of them and find out what's the best. I think there's a willingness to consider a 1 district, which is different than a potential BOCES model that's might be proposed. When APA's report first came out and it said 1 governance structure, basically we said we would be in support of that if it meets the needs of our students and improves access. We don't know yet what the details are and if it would do that. I think what I heard Pat say upstairs is that his model works right now, and that pulling him into 1 district might be disruptive. And so we don't know yet what that all looks like. So it's really hard to answer that question. I think we're open, and I think that's all of the directors are open to how can we best meet the needs of our students? How can we make sure there's more access to CTE? We don't want the pathway to diminish, we want it to expand. And as long as whatever model is doing that, then we can get behind it.
I'd like to chime in a little bit.
If I can,
Yeah.
just for clarity, when you say 1 district, are you talking about 1 CTE district? Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that's.
Yeah.
So,
I think that we recognize the workforce or lack of workforce conditions in our state, and how can we help with that? And there was an APA study that we thought it did a great job of recognizing what the barriers and challenges are, and how can we serve more students. And APA did a great job. Now they're working, the APA study was funded by the legislature with the Agency of Education joining in. Now APA is working for the Agency of Education at the bigger systemic thing. And the multiple letters that you have received from us, I may have written a few in the last couple of years, Jody's picked up the ball. We've been pretty consistent in our messages. We think APA hit the mark. How close the recommendations are to fixing what the problem statement are, the closer that those 2 things can come together, I think the better that we'll be able to do our job and serve more Vermonters. And we want to reduce the barriers to access, and they do exist.
So talk to us about the barriers. Is it, geography is 1. Right?
Calendars.
Well,
Calendars have been a barrier. I think we're much closer through the Superintendent's Association. This year we have aligned our vacations for next year. So across the state, February and April breaks are going to be aligned next year, which is a good step. It's a good first step. It doesn't align PD days for us yet. So there are still pieces that need to be done in the future, but I think that step is huge, and the fact that we were able to do it together, collaborating with superintendents across the state is a big win.
Jody touched and Melissa touched on the barriers to what it takes to graduate from high school in the state of Vermont is different as every high school in the state. And we may be in alignment as far as what our programming is, but then we have to negotiate with each high school how that carries over. And that's not a straightforward conversation. And that well-meaning educators have put together graduation standards that they think are important to every student. They're passionate about that. But how does a student fit all of that in a day? We've added more, we haven't taken anything away, and then how do kids fit a 2-hour or a full day program in their schedule when, hey, I want to be a carpenter, hey, I want to do this, and how do we schedule all of that? And it's become a real challenge.
Well, and I also heard you say that your pre-tech foundations classes, only Springfield High School students
Only
have the
Springfield.
access because of that transportation piece and,
Mm-hmm.
and scheduling. And I think that's true with like North Country as well. It's the students at North Country that access it, not the other sending school. And so that's a barrier. I think the competitive funding is a
Yeah.
barrier.
I was gonna try
You
to
know,
say that.
so when our sending schools are thinking about where they need to make cuts to try to get a budget passed, and they see this chunk of money that's going outside of their district, that is a barrier for them, which can impact access for students. I think that I can say that my center has gotten support from all of my sending schools in a way that I don't have capacity for the students who are applying. And so one of the barriers for students is that if they can't get into my program, the only way they can go to another program if there's space is if they can provide that transportation, right? So that's where transportation is a barrier. I have always talked about, and it's in my testimony, that my own son, we lived in the Harwood district, which is the Central Vermont Career Center district, as far as sending region. He got waitlisted to automotive. So because I knew education and knew his opportunities and I had the resources to do so, he applied to Randolph, got into their diesel program and went there. And so he was able to drive himself there and back as a junior and senior, because it's a 2-year full day program there. And that was probably the best thing for him. And we don't have those opportunities for all kids. So that's a barrier.
So Melissa, you feel free to just jump in like you're one of the three.
I want
As
that.
you will.
Okay.
Okay.
She's not shy.
Okay, I didn't want you to feel like you're, okay.
No, I appreciate that. If I could just, add on, chime in around the graduation requirements. In my testimony, I gave an example. As I mentioned, we have up to 11 high schools each year. 8 of them have different graduation requirements. 3 are alike because they're part of the Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union, so they're aligned. But the 8 others all have different graduation requirements. And, yes, it's up to the high schools. State statute right now says career and tech ed centers recommend credit. The high schools are the ones that award credit. So we can make a recommendation, but it's really up to, and it comes down to that school counselor in the moment deciding what they're going to give for that credit. So the example I gave in my testimony is, all of us have construction programs or building trade programs. They are learning and using geometry each and every day with everything that they do. And so one of the things that we recommend is that students in our construction program, that the math that they're doing in there is connected to geometry, and that if they're requiring a geometry or whatever integrated math, because that's another challenge, is understanding the curriculums. They're all sequenced differently at the different high schools. But it really comes down to what that high school, we have some partner high schools that will give them and say, yes, this meets their geometry requirement, but others refer to it as an elective math, which does not count towards their graduation requirements. So if they have 3 credits of math required, this counts as an elective credit. It does not count towards math. And so that's a frustration for us, because our school counselors will be sitting down with prospective students and parents, and they want to know, how are the courses here at Stafford going to help towards graduation? And we simply can say, this is what we recommend, but it really is up to your high school. You need to, so that creates a barrier. It creates some doubt in parents in terms of, is my student going to get what they need in order to have graduation? So I know for Stafford, and I can speak for Stafford, that is a great frustration for us.
Jody mentioned the funding. Just last week, I was in a regional superintendent's meeting, and one of the superintendents said, Scott, damn, you're costing me a lot of money. And this is a guy that is very, very supportive. You're costing me a lot of money this year. I go, well, what are you talking about? Well, he pointed to the number, and I said, well, you're sending me 10 more kids. My tuition rate has gone up 4.5% in the last 2 years, which is very frugal. It's less than yours, by the way. Oh, yeah, you're right. But when more kids access, 10 more kids access us in 1 year, that's 3.3 FTEs. You do the math on that, and that's a significant impact when he's losing enrollment, when he's faced with a 3% hit on the base rate like we are. That some of it is just the money, damn it, right?
Yeah.
And we've been pretty consistent. Whatever APA comes out with for a recommendation, we've asked for a non-competitive funding system. And if our dollars are represented in their budgets, then it draws attention. And really, it shouldn't even be there. If we're operating in a reasonable budget, then there's got to be a way to do the accounting that our number isn't shown and there's no awareness about it. Hey, yeah, this is what you want to do? Go. Hopefully that's what the recommendation ends up being.
And I think that's the really important part, is that, you know, student choice should be the first and only consideration. If a student chooses to go to a career and tech ed center, we shouldn't be worrying about the money part of it. It really needs to be about that. And, you know, and I'm an accounting major in college, but, you know, school funding is way beyond my scope. And one of the things that I always say is that, you know, I had a school board member on my regional advisory board years ago that every year in November and December, when we were discussing, you know, our tuition rate, you know, they would say, we have a set amount dedicated to Stafford, and we need to figure out how many students we are going to let come to Stafford, which is obviously against the law to do that. And that's, you know, I don't think it's purposeful in a lot of the schools, but I think the reality is they have a budget that they have to keep. They're trying to keep their teachers employed. They're trying to keep their schools open. And this is where the rub comes. You know, I tell my staff all the time, we make decisions here at Stafford for the students, not for the adults in the room. And I think that's the point we're at in education, as hard as that is to say. You know, we have to make decisions for the students, not the adults in the room.
Actually, I think Senator Hudson had his hand up.
So you were thinking of one district, and if you did go to one district, could CTE set up their own graduating standard rather than having to worry about the high school if you have the students come and you're doing their vocation, their trade plus their education?
So we're not doing that at every center right now. It would take time to transition to that, and we would need diploma granting privileges, which CTE does not have right now. We are not LEAs, even if we're an independent district.
And even as I speculated about what it would look like, that even if we're together as 17 in one entity together, we may have more bargaining power with the other school districts, so maybe we don't become an LEA, but the power of having 17 centers together to negotiate with the schools that may be providing the academics, depends on what the model is, that may provide us a more powerful seat at the table rather than negotiating with every single high school to do what's best for kids.
I think there's a lot of complicating factors, right? Of we exist in host high schools at this point. And so our facilities might have been built with CTE funds, but who owns that square footage is a question mark. I don't think we know that for sure. And so there's gonna have to be, like right now, I pay a facilities use fee to the Barry School District because I exist in their building. And so that helps pay for the facilities director and technology and the library and the nurse. And so those are things that entity will have to figure out across all of those schools, which is hard. And that LEA piece could potentially be a barrier in that's one of the ways where we see that competition. Because right now, all of our sending schools are the responsible entity for student plans, for graduating, for all of those things. And so they provide the special education services for students, for example. And so really figuring out who does that and how that works is going to take some time and some real thought about how it impacts us and our sending schools and our students. I think one of the other barriers that I think about is teacher pay. If we did have one district of CTE, then we could negotiate one contract for CTE teachers, which is really great for industry professionals. Right now, when they go into one of the sending districts, for example, not mine anymore, but when it's one like Melissa's, and you can correct me, Melissa, because it might not be true for you, but often that CBA, that collective bargaining agreement, was bargained by the union there, and their focus for the majority of the folks in that place is people who went through a traditional route of teacher education. And so they have a bachelor's, they have a master's, and that's what they recognize. And they might not equate a master electrician with a master's degree. And so that may mean that someone coming directly from industry who doesn't have the college bachelor's or master's is starting on that very bottom scale. And their experience in industry may or may not be recognized the same way. And so the amount of pay that they're gonna lose transitioning from private industry into CTE teaching it can be insurmountable in some cases, so that can be a barrier.
And I think tagging along with that, one of the things I wrote in my testimony was about, the need for growth of staffing and facilities, and it's a double-edged sword. So I need space to grow some of my programs, while at the same time, I don't have the staffing, and I can't get the staffing for the exact reason that Jody just described. Is Health Careers is a great example for us here. For next year, we're in the process of doing our admissions. I have 50 applicants for our first year Health Careers program, and we do have a 2-year program for that. I can only accept 12, and the reason is that I have been this entire year without that second Health Careers instructor because I cannot find someone that will work for what our bargaining agreement will pay them. So we're going to be turning away, 38 students that are interested in a health careers profession. And, it goes on and on. I have 2. I was fortunate to be able to hire a master plumber and a master electrician for our electrical and plumbing program. We can take 32 students. That's OSHA standards. It's not just an arbitrary number that we set. For next year, I have 76 applicants for that program. So again, a huge number of students that we are putting. Could I hire another electrician or plumber? Perhaps, but I don't have the space to be able to do that. When I look at auto tech, which is another one of our very popular programs, next year I can accept 16 students. We have 62 students that are interested in that program. And it goes on and on. Overall, we have about 380 applicants, and these are qualified applicants. We've already gone through that process. So these are the ones that meet our entry requirements for a school, meet the entry requirements for each of the programs. We will only be able to fill 262 seats. Because that's what we have space for. We are going to be starting a tech exploratory program, which is for 10th grade students to be able to explore different careers. We're in the recruiting phase for that now, and that will add 16 seats to that overall population here. But it's that challenge, if we have the space, we can't get the teacher. If we, have the teacher, we don't have the space. And so it really makes it a challenge when we're trying to balance the industry needs, the students' interest, and to, do what we can for the economy.
I have the same story with electrical and plumbing, over 60 applicants for 16 seats in both programs, and welding and building trades, over 50 applicants for 16 seats. And so it's heartbreaking because we know we're turning away students and we need those folks in the trades.
When you say seats, is that for a day or?
Yeah,
2
for
hours
a program, for one teacher,
Like,
I can have 16 students. That's the rule.
And would those students be there all day?
For my programming, it's a 4-hour day, yeah.
4-hour day?
Yeah.
Okay.
My building was built a little bit newer, so the demographics they studied, we have space, but we also are having the same issue, not as big as these two. I have twice as many students for our industrial trades program, which is a plumbing electrical program, than I have seats for. Our enrollment is increasing. We took a dip at the pandemic, and we're just getting back to pre-pandemic enrollments. But I'm running out of seats in some programs, and I think Jody's the president this year. If I say generally CTE enrollment is up around the state, I think everybody would nod,
Yep.
and that's in face of a general decline in high school enrollments, and I say more kids are interested in the trades. There's less of the stigma. The governor has come out. Kids are being a little bit more frugal as far as what they do next, and they see the trades as a good alternative, and we're experiencing some of that.
I don't have space. Or more educators.
Yeah, so
Curriculum, is there any problem with having a common? No? So
We're
you're-
all required to have either a dual enrollment class or industry recognized credential that's pretty weighty. Some combination of that in each program, and that's, I think, again, another Perkins requirement to make sure there's rigor in our curriculum. And we all have some versions of the same thing.
Okay.
The class may be from a different college if it's a dual enrollment class, but it's still an approved class for us.
I'm
Might
thinking
be
of one
construction
district.
core or apprenticeship level 1.
One CTE district, if you would be common across the whole spectrum for all four.
So can I interject and ask if anybody's heard that this one CTE district is kind of the goal? Like, we hear a lot of buzzwords, we've heard a couple months of overview of potential.
What we're hearing is the goal is that CTE would be an education service agency or a BOCES model. And so, but it wouldn't be the BOCES where sending schools opt in. They're under their 5-district model from the Agency of Education. They would all have to send to the BOCES. So the funds would come to the BOCES and be distributed from that. That's about the level of detail we know. That's our understanding of what the proposal is likely to be, unless there's been a change.
So you're all competing for the same students, like I consider it coaching. Some people.
I think we're competing for the funds to
Okay.
keep our programming open in potentially in that model, because we just don't know how are the funds going to be distributed. Some of what has been put forth in front of us but not fully proposed yet is that this BOCES or Education Service Agency would be in charge of human resources, transportation, so pulling the transportation off of the sending schools into that entity so they would pay for all of the teachers, all of the directors, all of the staffing. Some of the pieces that might make a lot of sense as far as saving money are like, we would all have the same finance system. It would be purchased for one entity instead of me paying $50,000 for that finance system and you paying $50,000. Now we have it for the state, right? We might have one learning management system.
HR department, yeah.
Right. So there are efficiencies that could happen with that. And there's just so many details that aren't worked out that it's really hard to wrap your head around and think about, okay, what are the next questions that we have to answer?
So how long would it take you to come up with a perfect plan?
Perfect plan.
But I mean, if you tell, right now, we set the policy, the
Yeah.
house.
Yep.
And if you guys tell us what you think the perfect plan is, and it makes sense, maybe you get more mileage out of that.
That would require 17 of us agreeing.
So you talked, when you first started, you talked about the different models.
Yeah.
You two you have independent SU, you're an independent SU or independent district.
Yep.
What do you see as the advantages of that for you, for the four of you who operate that way?
So I'm the newest district in the state, and I am fully ready to step away from that if there's a better model, right? But for us, we had Barrytown and Berry City making the decisions for 18 towns. So basically, every CTE has a regional advisory board. For us, it's our school board. But for any other center, it's the regional advisory board that makes recommendations to whatever the district board is. And so my regional advisory board, which I did live under that for 1 year, would send something to Berry School District, and usually they would rubber stamp it and push it on, but they didn't have to, right? And then the only voters that voted on it were Berry City and Barrytown. I have 18 sending towns. So right now, I get feedback from all of those towns instead of just 2. I think it's better representation. Yeah.
Yeah, everything Jody said, our mission is more focused on career and technical education. I'm not distracted with how to improve 4th grade reading scores, which I think is important, but it's not within my scope. So I think we can focus on that mission. Voters overwhelmingly approve our budgets. I think last year we were 65% approval rate. It's usually around that. I think people understand what we do. I have worked on both sides in a supervisory union, then we became our own technical center school district. And the idea is the sending schools, like Jody said, wanted to have more of a say. And the reason that a lot of the schools, the 3 schools that we serve said, is that Springfield had a hard time passing budgets. And what do you do when you're a manager? Everybody's got to cut 3%, and everybody's got to feel the pain. Well, the other senators are going, no, we don't want you to cut the money. We want you to spend it on our kids that are there. And that was one of the major pieces of why they wanted to say, and what happens with the funds and their kids.
So you have a few kids that go from New Hampshire,
Yes.
from what school district?
Fall Mountain Regional School District, we are able to get students from New Hampshire that don't have programming offered at Fall Mountain. They have some tech programs, or at Keene. Now, that river is a problem. We used to get kids for all the programs, but because Keene likes the revenue too, they're enforcing their state and regional agreements to make them go there, even though it's 40 minutes more a day of instruction in our program and 20 minutes less a day on a bus. But that's the politics of New Hampshire. We have our own politics. I've been trying to argue that point, but we're kind of at a stalemate.
And if I can just jump in, I was working in Springfield when we were part of the Springfield School District and then separated and became our own school district, and then had the perspective of Rutland. And I'll speak to the Rutland because Scott's already spoken to the Springfield. You know, we are a host district for Rutland City. We have a wonderful relationship with our administrative office, with our superintendent, with our local school board. Our regional advisory board is very active. We have close to 30 members by our bylaws on our regional advisory board, which includes all the superintendents from our districts that we serve, as well as a school board member from each of them, which is required. And then we have several business partners post-secondary. And I will say in my 10 years, and I'm going to knock on the fake wood of my desk, that any time our regional advisory board has made a recommendation, the school board simply approves it. We trust in what they have done and the work that has gone into it, and the opinions of their colleagues. They've been very gracious as far as hearing. They ask for, you know, our Rutland City School Board asks for regular updates from Stafford. So we give regular updates at the school board meetings. They ask for regular updates around our adult education. We're on the regular calendar. So it's very different. I know some of my colleagues around the state, they have to fight with their business office to get one thing done, and they take on those roles and responsibilities. And I know that can be challenging, but it really comes down to those relationships and the functionality of your regional advisory board and that relationship with the school board. And I think the host superintendent makes a huge difference in the building of that relationship. You know, but like Jody said, you know, prior to her becoming her own district, Rutland City is the only one that votes. But we always make sure, you know, we have several subcommittees of our regional advisory board, and we make sure that there is representation from each of our partner districts on each of those subcommittees, so that when we're kind of in that nitty gritty, in the weeds of decision making, they're having voice to represent their school district. So it's not just the voice of Rutland City all the time.
What are some of the certificates that kids who have, you know, spent parts of 9-12 and all of 11 and 12 with you? What, give us some examples.
Licensed nurse assistant, A+ certification in the computers. I'm working my way through the hallway.
Yeah.
My audio video production program does 2 CCV classes. Horticulture does the game of logging program. Carpentry does NCCR, which is a nationally recognized credential. We do AWS certification in welding, and we also do apprenticeship stuff.
So that they can walk out of the high school with that certificate and theoretically go somewhere.
My engineering program, I think, is up to 20+ credits if they stay 3 years. Yeah, there's rigor there. It's not the Tech Center of 1982 and all that. We're required to be rigorous. You know, Jody mentioned when we started the APA and that we've asked for things for going on 3 years. That's more of a longer term look and building the perfect center. There are some shorter term things that are part of the letters that we've written this year. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. There was a 3% decrease in the recommended base rate this year. That was arrived at, that they did a look back to 2007, and it was the plus and minuses in their forecasting. So now, rather than what is projected for this year, we all took a 3% hit over last year. We're asking, just keep it level, you know. Maybe we should do the pluses and minuses as we go along, not let them collect since 2007 and hit us all at once. That just doesn't make any sense to me anyways. That would cause us to turn around and charge more money to our sending districts, which then is a deterrent to enrollment, and I think everybody agrees we need more CTE. It just doesn't add up, so maybe that's something that can be looked at in the short term.
That's federal funding you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about state funding, the base rate.
Rate for us.
Yeah, they do an economic index, and New England something, but it's the forecast of what is going to be the education funding, and we all look at a letter from the tax commissioner and go, what is it going to be? Well, the forecast was, we're going to do a re-index and take 3% away, not even level fund you. The directors are recommending, we recognize these are hard times. Can we just be level? That would be okay. And we have a consensus about that. There's been a change in how we do enrollment. There's more administrative burden as far as that's concerned. We just found out recently that if somebody is doing an alternative way to get their diploma from high school for one of the contractors for that, they can't also enroll in a career and technical education program at the same time. Something to do with some sort of a federal guideline. We just heard it just hit February 7th,
Right.
which doesn't make sense to us. Like, hey, learn to be a welder and get your diploma in an alternative way, and then you're more of an economic engine for yourself. I think we have a handful of students at our center that just doesn't make sense. And then the other one we wrote about is the early college program. Right now, if a student chooses to do early college, they can't take a high school class, they can't take a tech center class. Now, I understand that if you're going to VTC all day long, sure. But if you're taking some CCV classes online, and I had 6 kids from my health sciences program, they all said, I'd like to maybe try to take my tech center program too, but they were forced to make a decision, and that seems to be totally opposite of flexible pathways. How about get your LNA, get your medical terminology class, college class, and then there's no flexibility in it now. I've had conversations with CCV, and they would be up to having a little bit more flexibility.
Where is that impediment coming from?
What?
Where is that?
I think it was an Agency of Education policy interpretation that was maybe in the last administration. The agency is aware. We've made this. They've been in on all our correspondence. I think they understand the problem. We haven't seen a proposal.
It's a competition of funds otherwise, right? Because if you are paying for a student to do early college and CTE, that student is double expensive, right? On your certifications question, if you look at this one on page 8, it's all of my programs. It shows the credits or industry certs, just so that I don't have to try to walk down the hallway and remember them all.
Good, yes, that's helpful. One more question, then we'll switch. If you can stay with that, would be great.
Yeah, I mean, maybe anyone can speak to this. I mean, when I hear what you're saying and look from like the big vision backwards, these are and can be lifelong places of learning, generational exchange between people who have skills and can offer them nimble enough to figure out what Vermont needs and provide programming and classes. Number one, I hope you'll come to the Economic Development Committee in the morning, because we just always say CTE, but it makes me sad to think that you're asking for level funding when we need a workforce, and we might otherwise spend money on new programs or initiatives that just replicate or kind of duplicate what you're already doing. And that's a big bias of mine from when I chaired the committee, is like, why wouldn't we just fund what's working and create more spaces? So I hope you'll come to economic development or have that conversation. And I'm just curious, what it would look like for you to stay involved in this conversation. You have colleagues who've said things in less diplomatic ways than you have, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate the diplomacy and the non-diplomacy. They just feel excluded from this process, and I think it would be a disservice for that to happen at a time that our economy is so central to everyone's, you know, priorities and thinking, and that we're going through this major transformation. So I don't know if you have.
We want to
like
be a part of the
lobbyist.
process.
Yeah.
We do not have a lobbyist.
Yeah.
So we're kind of doing that work.
Right.
But we definitely want to be at the table and
Yeah.
want to work through the details with the folks making these decisions.
Well, when we
Yeah.
testified last year, we spent a lot of time meeting with the Superintendent's Association with Jeff Francis to review the APA recommendations, and everybody was pretty in line with, those are great recommendations. Now what are we going to do about it? And as you can see from our documentation, we haven't changed our stance in the years. And I guess the last thing I'd want to say is, and this is my bumper sticker that I walk around my head, career and technical education is an elective in our education system right now. And as you said, it may be the most vital curriculum to who you are
Yeah.
and how you can provide for yourself and your family. But in our education system, let's see if we can fit that in with all your other requirements. And that just seems very backwards to me.
Where the
And
ugly stepdaughter is going to become Cinderella.
Can I just add one thing?
that's her bumper sticker, not mine.
I didn't mean to ask flippantly if you have a lobbyist. This building works in funny ways, and there are moments where we'll need someone to turn to, or, you know, we might need someone who's paying attention to some decisions being made. And if you, maybe if you've already done this, but if you can nominate somebody or have a point person, that's going to make it just easier for us and I know that's a lot to ask. Or you do the
You
rest
can
of the work
call
you do.
at any time,
Yeah.
and I am close enough that I can make it here
It's the
pretty
president of our
frequently.
association.
Okay, so you're like our person. Okay,
Yes.
Great. We have your email address.
Well,
You have-
if you would
I'll make sure you
stay,
do.
would make-
We will.
we're not squeaking the wheel disagree.
That's right.
We'll switch to the third model.
I think at this point, all of us would participate anytime you asked. I mean, we see this as a opportunity to maybe make some changes. You know, I think things are lining up, and I think, like Jody said, maybe upstairs, is that we're open-minded to looking for maybe an improvement to a system or a better system, because like Scott's talking about, Scott's been doing it for 21 years. He's been citing some of the stuff for at least 10 years straight since I sat in a director's seat. So just to remind you, I'm Pat Gukin. I'm the director at St. Johnsbury Academy, and my technical education model is, I guess, different or totally different than what you have heard from my colleagues. We have a comprehensive high school model at St. Johnsbury Academy where we provide career and technical education through just our high school. You know, we don't have a separate center, even though in paper we have a separate center because of the Agency of Education and all the requirements that they spoke about. I still abide by that. So when I explain to people what my job is some days I'm a superintendent like Scott and Jody, and then other days I'm a principal, maybe, and then other days I'm a tech director. So, because St. Johnsbury Academy is an independent school that is established in a region that has a lot of choice, right? So where Jody and Scott talk about multiple shared time schools, I have 2 shared time schools for my center. One of them is a comprehensive high school too, Linden Institute. So we share a lot of commonalities and blend pretty well, only being 7 miles apart. But we serve one public high school, which is a small school, Danville High School, which graduates from 25 to 30 students each year, I do believe.
So just to make sure I understand this, so you are deeply integrated into the day-to-day reality of St. Johnsbury Academy, and then the other 2 come and join into that, is that?
Yeah, the other 2 are called share time students. We share the students. But we actually wouldn't even say CTE students at St. Johnsbury Academy. We're all just St. Johnsbury Academy students because we're embedded in the nucleus of the school. So, so where some of the other tech centers may have some barriers, you know, transportation is less of a barrier for me because one of my two shared time schools are 7 miles apart. Might be 6 for Danville. So they're really close, where some of the other tech centers have kids maybe on a bus for 30 miles, you know, things of that nature. So it's just a different sort of regional concept. Some people will say we're the public high school, even though we're an independent school, because that's, you got a choice between Lennon Institute, Danville, or St. Johnsbury Academy. Those are your choices. And almost all the towns around my center are choice towns, except for Danville, because they have their own high school. So we're unique and different. And if we proceed with the governor's proposal, how do we fit? We don't fit. Like I report to my head of school, and if there's a model that says my colleagues behind me have to report to an executive director or to a superintendent, I don't fit, right? But I just wanted to be able to come here today and tell you how my center's different. Transportation is not an issue because I have access to 925 students in my high school that have the same transcript, have the same daily schedule, have the same vacation days, and so forth. And with Lennon Institute being my shared time school and being an independent school, they're pretty similar, right?
And you've been working with Lennon Institute for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, for a couple hundred years, you know, 175 or something. But we share a regional advisory board together in the tech center. So we don't have duplicate programs, you know, so my kids go up there for welding and LNA.
Go up where?
Go to Lennon Institute, because Lennon Institute has a tech center too.
Okay.
It's,
Okay?
and is Linden Institute a public school, or is that also?
Independent school.
Yeah, it's okay.
So we have 2 independent schools that are sort of the public high schools.
The only real one is Danville,
Yeah.
and they send their CET students to either you or Linden.
Yes.
Okay.
So with you and Linden, it's a shared program then, right? Because they might have some of the CTE courses while you have others, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, so your kids go back and forth.
Yes.
Okay.
And we share students, but we have duplicate programs. Only one, automotive. I think it's pretty obvious because that existed since 1970 probably, or around there, 71. So we can have duplicate programs if there's a need. We can make a regional decision, but we only have one that's a duplicate.
What's your average tuition?
Our both of us are in just under 25,000 each. So there's a statute that says we only pay one price for tuition if you're a comprehensive high school, and that covers CTE costs and everything.
Yeah, so the school doesn't, it's so different what you're doing, because the school doesn't, there's no disadvantage to the school to have somebody go to the program because it's all just part of the program.
Yeah, yeah, and if my student goes to Lennon Institute and they're there for a program, the money point 4 goes up there of the tuition rate goes to them, and if they send them to my way, I get 0.4 of their tuition rate.
Yeah. So,
See, a lot of your high schools used to have a similar, Holy High School, we had a woodworking shop, we had a metal shop, so, and then Stafford. So a lot of our students went to Stafford for automotive and welding and.
And it's hard, where I've been to their places, their centers are like separate entities attached to a building. Ours are all integrated into our facilities. So you may see biology, if we walk down the hallway, chemistry, electricity, robotics, another science class, human services, business. So we're in the science department, kind of, We're not separate. Now, obviously, there's downstairs on the ground levels where automotive is, and welding, and construction, and woodworking, and plumbing. It's down on the, you know, for ventilation and the bay doors and all those things. But
So you don't have to bring kids in like the other CTE centers do?
no, we don't.
To try and entice them to join?
Yeah.
They see it every day.
They see it every day. And our dining hall's in that same building too, so our kids eat with all the other students. They go to the same English building for, just like everyone else, the same math building as everyone else, and social studies, or the language department. Our students can take language, right? I sum it up this way. Where at your tech centers is the valedictorian of your high school taking woodworking? That's a true story. I'm not making it up. You know, and the best day was when I was
a
at.
salutatorian in my EMS 2 program.
Yes.
Yeah.
The best part was she was in there and she said, "This is where I use that geometry and trig."
Yeah.
But that was a great day. Our CTE kids, you know, obviously don't go. Majority of them are from that school, so they're playing sports, just like any other high school student. They don't go. I only have one sending school. I mean, we follow the Danville students because he's on the basketball team, and our kids actually go up there and watch him because, you know, he's our classmate.
So you and Lyndon are the two comprehensives?
Yes.
And you're the only, you are the.
We're the only two that are comprehensive high schools and independent schools.
Yeah.
And we just happen to be 7 miles apart in one region of St. Johnsbury. And we have 925 total students at St. Johnsbury Academy, and I think LI is just slightly over 400. So we serve, you know, over 1,300 students in the St. Johnsbury area, which is a service region by CTE
And
standards.
so the two of you then kind of coordinate which school is going to offer which.
Yeah, but we have a regional advisory board where it includes local superintendents.
But I mean, you're not both doing welding, you're not both doing
No.
everything. And you
No.
sort of, you coordinate with each other which it makes sense for which one to do, is that?
Yeah, you would come to a decision at your regional advisory board. Like, I started plumbing 2 years ago. So I came up with the idea, we need it, right? Definitely need plumbers. And so I proposed it to the regional advisory board. Did I talk to the tech director at LI first? Yeah, I told him I was gonna do it and everything. You know, we have to work together every day. We're sending kids together, and he's like, go for it, you know? So we got it approved, and I have my second year plumbing program up and running this year. I'm gonna have 20 students in it.
So just to make sure I understand it, so you talked at one point about you report to your head of school,
Yeah.
and then you have the advisory board. How does that work?
So the advisory board in our region, I don't know how it is, Scott, you can
I have a
help.
school board, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have school boards because we're
Yeah.
independent schools, so our head of schools are representatives. And then the superintendents from the local school districts that send kids to us are on the board. And there's 3 supervisory unions that oversee the elementary schools in our area, because we're the choice school for high school. There are a couple towns that are choice in elementary, but that's a different discussion. But so they're on there, and then we have 2 members from like the business community in there, and we have like Department of Labor representative. So they form a board because we don't have a school board. And then we're, as directors, we're not on the board, we're just there as participants.
But you have advisory committee.
Yes.
Senator?
Yeah.
Danville, when they send their kids over, that's all day?
A half day. We're a half day
Okay.
program
All right. So they get their English, math back
at Danville. Yeah, which with like students from Danville, we have the same barriers, issues that everyone else has. Graduation requirements, transportation. We'll come and get them and all this stuff, but it's just a logistical thing, even though it's close. That we have, we typically only get seniors most of the time because they're still getting some graduation requirements at junior. The money follows the student, and you've got a senior class of 25 students. They may not come or may. So.
And the last, are most of your curriculum overbooked, getting way more applicants than?
So we have, we are not at the level of being overbooked as like Melissa spoke about, which is just hard to imagine, really. We don't have a waiting list at this moment. We're pretty close, but we're out of space, and we're looking at, alternative space where some tech centers may build a house in a facility that's at their center. We don't have that ability, so we just work with community partners, and our teacher takes the kids out to a new house that's being built and help build it with that contractor in our community, and we build bonds that way instead. So it's, we do have an auto shop that can do everything, but we can't build a house like they can at Green Mountain Tech, or we don't even have space like you have at a parking lot, right? When you're doing that.
Oh, that's gone.
That's gone?
Yeah, we lost that.
In the facility merger. And that's what's so different with us. Obviously, we own all our facilities, and because of our independent nature. But it is, and then if we wanted to build something, it would be done from our trustees in a capital campaign, which was totally different than public dollars. But
Just a general question, how does the Hannaford Center fit into this?
It is an independent center, like Scott and I.
Yep.
They have two campuses. One is on the Middlebury High School campus, and then they have a North campus, which has, I think, 2 programs in it. The impacts for them would be a little different because their tuition rates are much higher than what I think the proposal base amount for students is going to be. So they may have to cut programming depending on how those funds are distributed.
Do you guys collaborate with them?
Nicole, their superintendent director, is a part of BACTED, so all of the directors are part of our association.
I've been getting a lot of mail from them, that's what I was wondering, so they got some good things going on.
Yeah, I think Melissa coordinates as far as students, because Addison and Rutland are pretty close together as far as county lines, so there may be kids that go for the programming that they want.
Yeah, there are 3 programs that we offer that Hannaford does not. And then like when our welding program is over enrolled, Hannaford just started, so we do give the kids the option of going up to Hannaford for that. So during this time of year, Nicole and I are emailing quite frequently about students and trying to find spaces for them.
Jody touched on it. There's an organization of many tech center directors, and there's some unknowns about where we're all going to go with this. So there's speculation that happens, and people get worried, and there's too many unknowns. We haven't seen the recommendations of APA. We have 4 people on the committee, so we're pretty well in tune, but we haven't seen it drop yet. And we always get worried about the unknowns, but I also think we got to be brave about, hey, maybe we need to adjust a little bit with who we are to serve our state. And I think as public figures, that's what we're all supposed to do when it makes sense. And so it is hurting cats a little bit.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, Pat, Green Mountain, and what Eric said upstairs. We were in the Economic Development, Commerce and Economic Development Committee this morning for House. And what he was talking about was that he does have a building that was renovated in 2008. And so he has spaces that are ideal for his programming. And so they can build a home inside that center every year and send it off. I don't have enough space for that. I don't have enough space for the number of kids that are trying to come in, similar to Melissa's problem with the number of applicants we have versus the number of seats we have. My board is moving forward with a construction project that they would take out for a bond vote in November, despite concerns about taxes and how folks might react to that. The feeling is we can't keep holding students back from accessing CTE. So if we can build a new building that's standalone and that allows us to meet the needs of the students that are applying, then that's what my board is moving forward with. So we're in a design phase, knowing that there's actually no school construction funding available, and hoping that something might come up, or that we'll get some support, or that whatever gets figured out allows for more access somehow.
I think that was last session that we wanted to be included. Whenever the conversations are about new buildings, that we want to make sure CTE is part of it. I think that's what happened last year, and there was a plan from late 90s into early 2000s about fixing up some of these centers that go back to the 60s so that they're more modern. And there was a plan in place, and then it all stopped. I think 2008, Eric Center up in Hyde Park was the last one to see state support for a technical center. Ours was done about the turn around 1998, 2000. We have a beautiful facility. It's awesome. We're very fortunate. But many of my peers aren't as fortunate as we are. I think Bennington got some rehab money back in the 90s too.
It's interesting every time maybe there's a grant opportunity, either federal or state. You know, there's a lot of flexibility of maybe how to utilize those funds for CTE, for programming and staffing and so forth. But guess what? We can't never use it for facilities. Never.
No
And,
concern.
There's a moratorium.
and it's extremely difficult to use it for transportation too,
So
right?
would it be fair to say that for all of you that are the CTEs, that you're all in some ways similar, but also would it be fair to say that you are also different because your communities are different and you meet?
Yes.
Okay, I see heads nodding. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you figure out the way to best meet the needs of your communities you serve, which can be different in different parts of the state.
Yeah, I said it earlier upstairs, but that, like, none of us built the system we're in. We all inherited our little regional section, and we may have built pieces of it, and we're modifying to try to meet needs, but we inherited it. So we can work through how to transition into something else, recognizing that there are pieces that don't work for everyone.
I've got 21 years. I'm the elder statesman in that, which pains me to say. I'm still pretty young anyway. These issues that we're talking about, 21 years ago, we were talking about the same issues, the barriers to access, funding system, graduation credits, all of those pieces have been part of the conversation for 21 years, and many of the rules and regulations that we live by, 20 plus years, and it's a different time.
Yeah, was it this committee that the legal counsel walked through the state board rules and showed you that they haven't been updated since 2007?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I just had one more question about undocumented kids, and I think we have a commitment to educate all of our kids in the state through our public schools, regardless of their status potentially, and we have a great need to support our immigrant population in building job skills and staying in a program that's affordable for them when they're not eligible for dollars for CCD, et cetera. I'm just wondering if there's anything, I mean, I know you might be full in some programs and so you can't, make this work, but it part of my vision for, a brighter future is that if it's about lifelong learning, that anyone, regardless of their citizenship status, would also be able to access your programming at some affordable rate. And I know that, like, for example, the new apprenticeship center that's, being built in Winooski has that in mind. And that, to me, even if it duplicates other programs, is of value because how many new Americans there are there. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, if you asked me on economic development, if we could stop all of the immigrants who are crossing our border and going to Boston and New York and give them housing and a job, we'd be better off. So I don't know if there's a way to work that into future models for you all.
So we haven't talked about adult programming at all, but that is another branch of what career and technical education centers offer. So we do have evening programming. I know that some of our centers probably do provide some skills for immigrants in that way, and also through maybe English language learning. And adults can access our day programs if there's space at a reduced rate per the law. So it's 40%, not more than 40%.
But they can't be in Vermont without learning now, I guess, so yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I'll just chime in at Stafford. We've been working with organizations down in the Brattleboro area, and we have immigrant students that are right now in our CDL program. We had one in our LNA program. We worked with them to get translators. The pinch right now is that in order to take, they were able to take their permit test for the CDL, which is a state test. For the actual CDL, it's a federal test, so they have to be able to do everything in English. They cannot have a translator for that. So that's kind of where we're at now. I'm trying to figure out that piece, but we've been serving quite a few immigrant and new Americans.
You said 40% of,
Not more than, yeah.
not more than 40% of tuition, like
Our
the.
tuition for regular high school students.
Okay, okay.
That's the rule.
Okay, one more question here.
So, didn't Stafford take on some of your adult learning slots for high school students a couple of years ago?
We have, when we have space available, we do have adults in our daytime programs.
Right.
By statute, we have to, first of all, look to admit students into the, high school students into the spots. So usually in August, if we still have spots available, we do take adults in. It most often happens in cosmetology, where a student, which is a 2-year program. So a student may start with us as a senior, and then they'll apply to come back for the second year. And we're a state test, we test here for the state. So the students actually can, a lot of our adult students will finish in January. So we have a January test date, and they can actually become licensed cosmetologists in January.
Good.
So this year we had 3.
Yeah, we have a full-time adult coordinator at St. Johnsbury Academy and have a separate sort of like adult ed training facility in our downtown to commit to it. And we have an LNA program that we started up with a grant from Senator Sanders that will take students from LNA to LPN to RN through the process. And we're funding that through a congressionally directed grant. And why I bring that up is last summer we had 2 high school kids that were juniors in high school that couldn't get into LNA, did it during the summer. We had 2 graduates that could never fit it in their schedule when they were in high school. And then, we had some other demographic, single moms were in there. There was an English language learner in there. So we had 8 students that accomplished that during the summer. So adult ed is actually, and I already got 2 students that are juniors this year in high school. They're going to take LNA this summer. So adult ed isn't always adult ed. It's turned into workforce training, right? And so there is some flexible pathways where we kind of get this, stereotype in our head, adult ed, totally adults, coming back to learn a skill and so forth. But it's actually just an extension of the education that we provide during high school sometimes, because, sometimes they just don't know what they want to do when they're a junior in high school, right? Or a senior.
We also have several high school students from Burton Academy that will take our adult evening program, and the Stratton Foundation actually pays for them to do that. So they'll come up here. They don't want to commit to a full-time program, but they know that that's something that's of interest. So we've had that. Welding is the most popular one. We've also had phlebotomy and LNA as well.
There's a lot of programs through the Department of Labor that'll help now fund adult learners for like lineman school, and there's funds through VSAC that is wonderful, right? So there's a lot of funding for support for scholarships and financial aid and adult ed that helps fund it, but overall adult ed at CT level is not funded at all. We get $20,000 from the Department of Labor, and that's it. And some people don't know adult education is under CTE. So thank you.
Thanks, yeah, thanks, all four of you, it was really,
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to us again.
it was really helpful, and we'll stay in touch.
If we get asked, we'll come at
Yeah,
anytime.
yeah.
It's our passion.
Well,
Thank
it's
you.
important we get this right. For, yeah, so, okay, that was something.
Thank you.
See you, Melissa.